viewers, it's Diane from Spencer Ugg Sewing Patterns, bobbing on with a quick free tutorial for clear vinyl. So, we all need a clear plastic bag for liquids when travelling through UK airports, and I believe it's the same in the US and many other parts of the world. Personally, I always use the rubbishy disposable bag that they hand out at the airport, but by the time I get home, it's normally in shreds and I'm rummaging around trying to find one again for my next trip. So, as I've been playing around with clear vinyl over the last couple of weeks, I decided, well, what better use for it than to make myself a decent airport liquids bag. Now, I've got to say, I believe some airports insist that you use the supplied plastic bag, so please take this video as a suggestion only. Don't tell them I guaranteed anything. So the standard size plastic liquids bag in the UK is 20 by 20 centimetres. That's an 8-inch square below the Ziploc line. And that's a quart size in the US. So I'm going to be sticking with very similar dimensions to adhere as closely as possible to it as I can. Of course, you can amend the size to your own needs. You can make it larger or smaller to suit any purpose at all. We'll be sneaking a little tuck into the bottom to become a more 3D bottle friendly enabled pouch, if you know what I mean. And it helps it to stand up by itself too. Now, my last free tutorial was on tips for sewing with clear vinyl and the different thicknesses of vinyl that are available and what they're suited to. So please refer to that video first if you haven't worked with clear vinyl before, and I'll tag it on to the end of this video for ease, just in case you haven't seen it already. Okay, so if you're ready, let's go sew a quick airport liquids bag. So things you're going to need for this project, not a lot. Cut a rectangle of clear vinyl, 21 centimetres wide by 46 centimetres high. In inches, that's 8.5 inches by 18 inches. I'm going to use a number 3 zip, 11 or 12 inches, around 30 centimetres or longer, or a piece of continuous zip, and I use polyester sewing thread for strength. So I'm using 0.35mm thickness vinyl here, but you can use a thinner one if you prefer. 0.5mm looks really good, but it does start becoming bulkier. I wouldn't recommend a thickness of more than 0.5mm as it'll become too hefty and difficult to turn through. We did look at the different thicknesses in my how to sew with clear vinyl video, which I'll link here too. In fact, I'll try and add it onto the end so you can just reference that if you want to, and I'll put a timestamp in. So go ahead and cut your rectangle of clear vinyl, 21 by 46 centimetres or 8.5 by 18 inches. And we want the rectangle to be in a single piece. We don't want a seam at the bottom because we're going to add this sneaky little tuck in the bottom, and we don't want the extra bulk of a seam in there too. So first we're going to add our zip. And we want the bag to keep a slimmer profile as possible, so I've chosen a number 3 rather than number 5 zip because obviously they're finer teeth on there. We want a good long tail on the zip, and that's going to enable us to get in and top stitch the zip once we've added it to the vinyl. So grab an 11 or a 12-inch zip, around 30 centimetres, or a piece of continuous zip will do the same job. Again, to keep the profile as slim as possible, I'm not going to double over this clear vinyl when I'm attaching it to the zip. So by that I mean, normally if we were using fabric, we would, let me put this the right way around, we'd put the zip on the wrong way around first, like this, stitch it here, and then fold back the fabric so you'd have a double layer of fabric on the zip edge. But we don't need to do that with the clear vinyl. We want to keep it as thin as possible, but also it's pretty strong stuff. And this 0.35mm is more than strong enough for this type of occasional use bag. So I'll lay the zip right side uppermost with puller to the left when closed. So hopefully that's your left. close it up completely. And then I'm going to lay one short edge of the vinyl directly onto the zip tape. It doesn't have a right or wrong side, by the way. So I'm laying it on the right side of the zip tape underneath the teeth, and I'm just leaving a couple of millimeters gap before the teeth themselves. So I want the zip tail to be on the side where it's the closed end of the zip. So just keep an inch on this side, for example, just so you've got the puller out of the way. And then I've laid my vinyl directly on top, just left a couple of mil gap between the teeth and the vinyl. Obviously you can't use double-sided tape because you're going to be able to see it afterwards. So I'll just show that to the camera. You see just a couple of mil underneath the tape. So I'm going to sew one line of stitching a maximum of 3 mil away from the top edge of the vinyl, through the vinyl and the zip tape. So really close to the top edge of the vinyl, because I'm going to add a second line of stitching. The second line is optional. You could also use a zigzag stitch if you prefer. So I'll go ahead and do that first line. So I did keep the walking foot on my machine. I didn't use a zipper foot because the vinyl is really sticky. I find it easier to use the walking foot, but obviously try with your own machine. And as I say, just refer to that video as well. I've made a video already on how to sew clear vinyl, and I'll tag it onto the end so you can see it, and I'll tell you all about the different feet that you can use, different stitch lengths, different vinyls and everything, and it should be a big help. So because I don't have a lining, I want to keep this zip and the zip tape firmly in position. So optionally, you can stitch a second line just below the first on the very edge of the zip tape, just to keep everything nice and tidy. Alternatively, you could use a zigzag stitch, or you could just leave it with the one. That'd be fine too. There's my 2 lines of stitching on the zip, and that'll hold the zip tape down and it won't catch on anything, but completely optional. So let's attach it to the other side. So if you turn that around, flip it over, do your zip up. So again, we want the right side of the zip and we want the other side of the panel, and line it up so that the sides are matching. You want to make sure it starts and finishes this side in the same position. So I'm going to position that again just a couple of millimeters from my zip teeth, and I'll clip it in place at each end, and then I'll undo my zip and clip it on a bit more. I'm just stitching through the one layer, and this is why now you will see why we need that extra long zip tail. So open the zip again, and you can add a few more clips onto that side of the zip. So this means, because we've got that zip tail, it means that we can get in to stitch it because it's a one-piece bag. If you didn't have the zip tail, you wouldn't be able to get in properly to stitch it. So if the body was in 2 pieces, it'd be fine. You wouldn't need the extra zip tail. But as I wanted to add the little tuck in the bottom, that little secret tuck, oops, you see here, on the bottom of the bag, that gives it that extra bit of volume and helps it stand. Then I want it in one piece because I don't want the extra bulk of a seam on the bottom edge. So let's go ahead and do my 2 stitch lines on this side too. So open your zip fully, as much as you can get in. So the longer the zip tail is, the easier it is. As I say, it is a bit fiddly doing the 2 lines of stitching, so you might be better, if you're not confident, using a zigzag stitch, or just leaving it 1 line of stitching. That's fine too. It's only for the look of it, it's not for, it's going to be strong enough with 1 line. Made a right thread nest there. Okay. So I'm going to turn it inside out and zip it up. So I'm the right way around at the moment to see where the zip is. So turn that inside out and zip it up. Trim off any threads. Probably should have used blue thread for that and it wouldn't have been so obvious, would it? I'll say I've used it as a style feature. So I'm inside out and you're looking at the wrong side of the zip now on the outside of the bag. Now because I want the zip puller to be on the left hand side of the bag when it's finished, because it's inside out I'm going to use it on the right hand side for the moment, and then when it pops through it'll be on the left. So I'm going to position it so that the zip is lying about 3 centimetres or 1 1/4 inches from the top edge. So we don't want it right up here on the top edge. The reason for that is I'm putting it a little way down so that when you're travelling through the airport you can lay it zip side down so your toiletries are inside, so people aren't going to see that it's actually a zip bag, but you're still disclosing all the full contents without distracting the zip on the top. And it makes it less bulky putting the zip in there too, rather than having it on the top edges and folding it in. So about 3 centimetres down, doesn't matter hugely. A little bit more, just not too close to the top. There we go, that looks about right. Just make sure it's equal and your sides are lining up, and then I'm just going to clip it at the sides. I've got my finger in there. And then I'm going to make a mark in chalk or a little snip 2 centimetres or 3/4 of an inch from the bottom edge. So just flatten it out for the moment. I'm going to make a mark at 2 centimetres or 3/4 of an inch. So I'll put a snip in it. Just keep it within the seam allowance because we don't want it to weaken the bag. This side as well, 2 centimetres or 3/4 of an inch. So this is how we're going to put the little tuck into the bag at the bottom to give us that extra volume. And then place your ruler across or something similar, something straight from one edge to the other, and fold it up. So your ruler is on the notch at both sides, or the snip or the mark, and then fold the bottom up. Take your ruler away, and all you're doing is making sure that that is 2 centimetres and it's even all the way along. So a bigger fold at the bottom would give you a bigger opening or a bigger expansion at the bottom, but it would also reduce the height of your bag. So I've made this to ideal proportions, hopefully. So I've just put a clip in both sides there. Now, very importantly, as I keep forgetting, open your zip 3/4 of the way, or 2/3 of the way, just so it's inside the pouch itself, but not going over the ends. So clip that back in place nice and firmly. And then I'm going to stitch down both sides with 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance from edge to edge. And that'll hold that tuck in place, that'll keep our zip in place. And then I'll go back and I'll just do a little line of zigzag just across each end of the zips. Zip, just to neaten it, because you're going to be able to see that through the bag, and it'll stop anything fraying too. If I didn't mention it before, remember to back tack beginning and end of each seam. Beginning and end of each seam. Trim, and then I'll zigzag. I'll do that first. fact, what I haven't done is trim the ends of the zip off. I better do that before I zigzag or it'll be pointless. Right, so we're just trimming the edges of the zip to the same width as the pouch. So probably easier from the other side so you can see it exactly. Go. So now I'll zigzag just across the ends there, just across the ends of the zip. Tidy up all those thread ends because there'll be a few now. Notice how particular I am being with these because I don't want to see them inside the bag dangling around afterwards. So that little tuck will form our base. It's like a little bellow when we turn it through. So you will note I haven't added any zip pull tabs on this. There is a reason for that because I want it to look as much like a regular plastic bag as I can when it's upside down going through the airport. So now you can have a chuckle turning it through. Make sure that zip's open as far as it can go. So depending on your fabric thickness, this might be easy peasy, or if you used a really heavy one, it may not be quite as easy peasy. Lots of tips in my other video for turning through and working with it too. But if you warm it slightly, there's a few ways of warming it slightly which will help. Phew! That's a workout. So that's your pouch complete. Fill it with your liquids and you're ready to go. You can add a little ribbon to the zip puller, or you could add one of these penny pullers, I call them. They're easy to just use. You can get a dozen for £1 or £2. Often if you've got a tiny little hole in your zip and you've got a big cord, it's really difficult to push through, so I would use what I call a leader thread. So put a little bit of sewing thread through there, a polyester sewing thread, something nice and strong, something that's small that you can easily thread through the hole in the zip. Thread it through your zip puller or ribbon, or round a loop in your ribbon, and then you can use the thread to pull it through. So it's easier than trying to get your fingers in, and just pull it through that loop there. And we're in. And then I can just push that through the loop and we're affixed. So there we go. You could also decorate them to your heart's content, either before making up, or this one I added a name to. I just used a little bit of permanent vinyl cut on a Cricut machine, and that's the stuff we use for stickers, not the heat transfer stuff. It's not t-shirt transfer, it's an actual, it's the sticker itself, the vinyl sticker. And I'm not going to tell you who this one's for because it's a secret. So fill up your bags and you're ready for your travels. The eagle-eyed amongst you will have already noticed that I've got one zip going one way and one going the other. Obviously it's personal preference and it doesn't really matter, but just to let you into a secret, I got virtually to the end of filming and realised that my camera had conked out in the middle, and it hadn't saved a big tranche of me sewing the zip on. So I hurriedly filmed just sewing the zipper on again, put that in the middle, didn't pay attention to my own directions. So that's why I've got one going one way and one going the other. But as I say, it really doesn't matter, it's just personal preference. So I hope you're going to get some good use out of these little pouches. I know I will. I think, or I believe, airport regulations are changing soon and we're going to be able to carry liquids again. But until then, hopefully this should fit the bill. And why not make a smaller or larger version to hold items around the home, or inside your handbag. It's great to be able to see what's in there at a glance. So what are you waiting for? Go sew! If you haven't already watched my video on working with clear vinyl, hang around for a couple of seconds and it will follow on from this one. I'm off to play with some more clear vinyl. See you soon! Hello bag builders, it's Diane from Spencer Og Sewing Patterns, bobbing on because I thought it was high time I tried out sewing with clear vinyl. Now I have been meaning to buy some clear vinyl for absolutely ages, and I've never got around to it because I thought I probably won't have too many uses for it. And then about 2 weeks ago a friend of mine sent me a couple of small pieces just in 2 different thicknesses to try out. So I had to go on a few seams just to try out what it was like, and wow, I think it's pretty good stuff. I found the swatches so much easier to sew with and so much stronger than I expected that I dived in and I purchased a range of a few different weights so we could try them out. So here is today's experiment. My first time sewing clear vinyl, my tips for sewing with it, and the different thicknesses that are available. So this is super clear PVC sheeting, and PVC is short for polyvinyl chloride if you want the full name. It's often used for automobile and marine applications. It comes in a huge variety of thicknesses. The ones most particular for bag making are 0.15mm, 0.25mm, 0.35mm, 0.5mm and 0.75mm, and please don't ask me to convert that to squillionths of inches because I wouldn't know where to start. You can find thicker versions too for other purposes. I'm holding each to the camera and giving it a bend so you can see what each one is like as I'm chatting. This particular vinyl is fire resistant, UV resistant and cold crack resistant. I purchased the 0.25, 0.35, 0.5 and 0.75mm thicknesses to try them out. It's 135 centimetres wide and it's pretty economical, I must say, £6 to £8 a metre depending on the thickness, and I will add a link in the text below for where I purchased mine, though there is quite a few places you can get it from. So this is the very first time I've tried clear vinyl, so I'm going to make the same item twice and learn on the job. I'll speed it up, don't worry, I don't want to keep you hanging around all day. The first showing you all the things I did wrong or had to overcome, and the second with all my amendments. And then at the end I'll summarise my general list of tips that I've learned so far. So the first bag I made was in the thinner clear vinyl, 0.25mm thickness. This is the pixie pattern shrunk down to 70%, but I did leave the width of the arms and legs as wide as the original to give me a bit more room inside, and I'm going to make it of course without any innards or straps. I found it really easy to cut with a rotary cutter. I did try pressing the vinyl to get the creases out first with a cool iron, and I even used a pressing cloth, but it did not go well. The vinyl just became soft and wrinkled, so I'll probably give that a miss in the future. Just flatten it out and shove it under a rug for a few days instead. I'm using a lighter colour of thread here so it doesn't stand out much. Pink is what I've got on my machine. You can see it a little bit, but probably white or cream might be a bit better so it just kind of blends in. I tried a few different stitch lengths, all seemed to work fine, and I settled on a 3. I'd just say avoid too small a stitch as you're perforating the fabric and creating a tear line as such. So in general, in terms of stitch length on any vinyls, longer is stronger. I'm using a Microtex needle in the machine to keep the stitch holes as small as possible. The clear vinyl is really flexible, and personally I found it dead easy to sew. But I've got a few tips coming up as it depends on your actual machine. So let's finish making up this first one and see where we can make some improvements. I'll talk about different feet for vinyl sewing during the next sample too. However, if I only have one word of warning with clear vinyl, is turning through. It is not the easiest thing to turn through, particularly the corners. Okay, so on to sample 2. Using the things I've already learned from a first attempt, I'm going to make a few improvements as we go. Using the same pixie pattern, I'm using a thicker clear vinyl this time, 0.5mm. I found the first one didn't really have as much body as I'd like, it was a bit too squishy. This time I'm going to top stitch my zip seams, as the vinyl doesn't crease, it doesn't hold a fold, and I really want it to hold down better. So I'm going to use an extra long zip tail on here to give me access to be able to top stitch it. Now this time I'm also going to add zipper pull tabs, as the vinyl is really sticky and it really helped me with opening and closing the bag. So I've just cut 2 semicircles out of the clear vinyl. You could add a strap at this stage if you wanted to add a strap too. Webbing would probably be the easiest, but you could double up the vinyl if you preferred. I'm going to finish the ends of my zipper with a bit of zigzag stitching too at this point, because obviously you can see the raw ends of everything inside. Alternatively, you could bind the end of the zip or bind the seam that the zip's on. I'm going to really pay attention to trimming my thread ends here as well. I'm not going to use the auto thread cutter in the machine because that's going to create nests and it's going to leave long ends. Obviously, because you can see everything inside, we don't want any thread nests, we don't want any loose threads. I want to keep it really clean and tidy. So again, it's a bit tough to turn through. It's a lot tougher than I'm used to with fabric, and obviously the thicker the vinyl, the tougher it is to turn. I would not want to make anything too small with this thicker stuff. The bigger it is, the easier it's going to be to turn. Chuffing out, you really have to work to push these corners out. So that's the second attempt finished. I definitely prefer this thicker vinyl. It gives a much better finish in this size of bag. So this one was the 0.5mm and this one is the 0.25mm. So you can see the difference. It is a much better structure. So let's have a quick summary of the things I've already learned today on using clear vinyl for the first time. So my summary for choosing and constructing a clear vinyl project. I've still got a lot to learn, but these are my findings so far. So initially choose a 3D project, not a 2D project, or you'll lose the benefits of the clear vinyl as it'll all stick together. And what I mean by that is 3D, obviously it's got sides, it's got a gusset maybe, you can see what's inside, it's got shape inside. If you make a 2D project, you're going to lose that feature and the look, and everything's going to stick together. It's not going to work as well. So stick to projects where they're going to be a 3D shape to give best results. Choose the vinyl thickness which is suitable for the project you're working on. So for a larger bag, use a thicker vinyl which will stand unaided. For clear panels, ID windows or lightweight smaller pouches, choose a thinner vinyl, something from this end. A thicker vinyl on a small project will be too difficult to turn through, and a thinner vinyl on a larger item won't give you the body you want. Don't press your vinyl. Mine was not a good look. Use a rotary cutter to get a nice clean edge. Don't use your best rotary cutter though, or your best scissors, as it dulls the blade. There's no need for lining, of course, and no need to neaten any edges. We'll just leave the seam allowances raw. There's no chance of fraying with this stuff. But you could add a coloured binding to jazz it up inside if you wanted to. Don't use pins, as they'll leave holes, and even use clips sparingly, as they can mark the vinyl. I particularly noticed that on the thicker ones. So I really was expecting it to be sticky and awkward to work with, but I had no problem sewing with the clear vinyl using a walking foot. I had my zipper foot on at some stages, and that was much stickier and it didn't hold as well. I had to help pull it through a little bit, though it still sewed okay, but it will depend on your own machine, so have a play around and find out what works for you. If you don't have a walking foot, try a non-stick foot, a Teflon foot, or a roller foot. You can even use lube, tissue paper or talc to aid the fabric through your feed dogs. Additionally, you can also slow the speed of your machine down. It will allow more time for the feed dogs to take hold of the vinyl. Another thing to try is to lower presser foot pressure. Use a light coloured thread to blend in, unless you want to see the stitches inside, of course. I actually think a lighter colour, such as a very light pink or blue, will disappear better than a bright white. I tried both and I did feel that the very light hues were better than the bright white. Use a polyester thread for strength and keep to a regular weight thread rather than a top stitch or heavyweight thread to avoid extra friction. Use a longer stitch length, longer is stronger. Use a slim, sharp needle, such as a Microtex needle. The vinyl is very flexible and seems pretty strong when sewn. The stitches don't rip out and it doesn't feel like I'm causing a tear line with my stitches. The fabric really is holding its own. Top stitch where necessary to hold down a fold. The vinyl does not hold a crease itself, so if you want a crease to be in place, you need to stitch it down. Finish any zip ends neatly and trim thread ends carefully because you see everything. And I guess that is the whole point, isn't it? Turning through is challenging, and on some projects no doubt a bit strenuous because it sticks together so much. I'm thinking that adding a little talc to the flat fabric before makeup might help with that bit, and I will try it on my next project and let you know. Also, you could try leaving the finished item before turning through on a warm windowsill for a while, or warming it slightly with a hairdryer to make it a little more supple before attempting turning it through. But remember, it isn't always necessary to turn it through. You can have your seams on the outside with this fabric too. I've just tried this little case on a scrap of the thinner 0.35mm thickness and it looks absolutely fine. I added little strengthening dots behind my snaps and I'll find out how the strength holds up, but no problem so far. I do really love these clear finish bags now. If you're interested in the sewing pattern for the Pixie, which I used here, I'll add a link in the text below the video if you just scroll down to the right and underneath. The sewing pattern is for a fully lined crossbody bag. Here I've just used the outer pattern piece only and I've printed it slightly smaller, obviously no lining, no innards. The thicker vinyls really support themselves in a large shape, so I've got lots of ideas going through my head for this stuff right now. It would of course also be great for table protectors and mats, and we could decorate those too. Anyway, I'm a convert and I'm thinking clear bags are really handy. Great when you have to disclose items you're carrying, of course, such as for a stadium bag or for carrying liquids at an airport, but of course for so many other things too. I will do a tutorial for a correct size airport liquids bag next, because I could really do with one for my travels rather than the crummy plastic bag we all carry. So let me know if you've used clear vinyl before. What was your experience? Did it stitch up easily? Did you struggle to turn it through? Please share all your tips for working with clear vinyl in the comments below the video or on my Facebook group. I hope you enjoyed finding out a bit more about working with clear vinyl along with me. If you did, please click like and subscribe to the channel for more sewing fun.